I'm really excited to be making this video. Since the start of this RuneScape abuse series, people have been asking me to interview somebody who's involved in RuneScape private servers. And I've been trying. I've probably talked to 5 different people now, but everything they tell me just isn't interesting enough to make a video about, and that's really frustrating. However, 3 days ago, this changed. A person going by the name of Noele contacted me. Throughout our conversations, it's clear that this is somebody who has an intimate understanding of private servers. Not only is she running these servers herself, but she's also running the development communities where people go to learn, share, create these servers. And she's making really good money doing this as a full-time job. We're talking 6 figures a year. So I took this opportunity to ask her some really interesting questions. We talked about taxes, shady practices, private servers being hacked, what Jagex is doing, donation models, and even a guy getting beat up over these private servers. I think you guys are going to find this one very entertaining, so without further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. It's important to get a background, so the first thing I asked Noele is to give me a little background of her history with RuneScape private servers. And she told me that she found out about RuneScape when she was very young, 8 years old, and not long after that, she stumbled across the original kids on the block in the private server scene, Moparscape and Celebsoft. Both of those communities are long discontinued now, but way back then, she actually managed to convince an owner of one of these private servers, a guy going by the name of Q, that she could code, and he gave her access to that very rudimentary private server source code. With it, she changed around some values and saw how stuff worked, but more importantly, this marked the beginning of her now 11-year-long history with developing and working on these private servers. She told me that she's developed and staffed pretty much every revision since 3.17, and a revision in the private server world is like an era of RuneScape. So 3.17 is like 2007, 2008, and she's worked with those revisions all the way up until the current ones for RuneScape 3, for example. I wanted to hear about money because early on in our conversation, she mentioned that she does this as a full-time job. And she told me that technically all of her projects are still in development, but last year, off one of her private servers, she made $120,000. She then went on to say that this year we're focusing on Oldschool Runescape. They're building another private server around that, and they're hoping to take home 3 times that amount. She told me that one of the reasons that she makes so much is because she was innovative in the way that the donation models work on her private servers. So she said that most servers are selling ranks, which give different residual benefits, maybe XP gained, or they're selling items directly to the players for money, and or some sort of in-game donation currency. She said what she does on her servers is innovative because it allows players to still buy those individual perks, but it also accumulates into a total amount donated, and depending on how much you've donated, you get other benefits. So at $20 you get certain benefits, $50 you get even better benefits, $100 even more, all the way up to $1,000, which really incentivizes people to keep donating and striving towards reaching those higher tiers. But what about the other private servers? How much are they making? The big ones. And she told me that she knows the popular pay-to-win servers make quite a pretty penny, usually $25,000 to $50,000 a month with proper management. She went on to say that the very top servers are reaching towards $100,000 a month, but it's dependent on the player count and their retention rate. She said the most popular RuneScape private server to date was SoulSplit, which no longer exists, and it was processing as much as $20,000 a day in its prime, and supposedly had a deal with Jagex because of the large profits at the time, and made close to $10 million in its lifespan. The owner of SoulSplit actually went on to start a streaming company known as Medieval TV, which currently employs what looks like 18 people, so that should give you an idea of the type of money this guy had to be able to start a startup of that size. To further that, he actually boasted about how much money he was making off SoulSplit on his LinkedIn profile. Quite surprising. Every video, the demand for an answer about taxes gets bigger, and I've been asking, but Noele is the first one who's answered it. She said, quote, "It's pretty basic, honestly. I've seen people in the comment section who are on point. You establish a company and have it control the financial assets of your sales. You pay yourself and other developers directly and pay expenses out of your business finances. This usually falls under capital gains, so depending on how much money you're making, as well as the self-employed tax rates for your area, it can really vary. She went on to tell me that this isn't really anything illegal or abnormal as far as business/tax structure goes. She also said, something relevant for everyone else you've interviewed by the way, if you make $20,000 or over in a year on PayPal, they're sending your income information to the federal government for compliance, so don't expect to escape it. So the taxman's got his cut, he's happy, but what about Jagex? What are they doing about these private server communities, and what has Noelle's experience been with them? She told me, quote, while I implied that the tax structure is not illegal, using Jagex's assets in the way that we do is copyright infringement. She said that Jagex has pretty much ignored the private server scene for years now and hasn't made any legal implications to servers in a while. One of the most recent examples, however, when they did make a legal implication was 2006scape. And that was a server that was hyped up before the release of Oldschool Runescape, and actually it was one of the main sparks for the creation of Oldschool Runescape because they were promising to bring back Runescape as it was in 2006, and over 100,000 people actually signed up for that server's pre-launch. Now, Jagex saw that, they knew it was a threat, so they got in contact with the owner, threatened him with legal action, and said that if he is ever caught making money with their assets again, he will be punished. And that's pretty much the standard for what happens when you're pursued by Jagex for running a private server. Now, as for Noelle's experience with Jagex, she told me basically it's been pretty good. Within her development community, they recognize the relaxed status that Jagex has kind of taken towards private servers, and they also noticed that Mod Ash was sometimes posting snippets of RuneScript on his Twitter, and seeing that, they actually started tweeting him, asking him to show them little bits of code about things like configurations, debug names for music tracks, miscellaneous NPC data, information on how they're handling dynamic systems like doors, and she told me that Ash has really dumped a lot of miscellaneous information for them, but nothing extremely useful or anything that would enable them. But it's just nice for them to see how RuneScape implements their features versus how they, as private server developers, are implementing those same features. One of the other things I wanted to hear from Noelle is the shady practices going on within these private server communities. And she told me that sometimes malware gets spread within these private servers, typically from untrusted developers or the smaller servers. She said that when it comes to the big servers, there's actually a lot of people that pick apart their clients, specifically looking for malware in hopes of tainting that owner's reputation. She also told me that there's a few fake private servers set up with the sole intent of spreading malware to anybody that downloads them. Perhaps more interestingly though, she told me that there's a lot of black hat or attempted black hat activity from these private server owners. She said that some of these owners will take any means necessary to detriment their competition. Along with that, they'll take any means necessary to protect their own private servers from outside attacks. She went on to describe to me an incident that happened in Thailand, and I want to share that story with you now. Mainly because some weeks ago, another person involved in private servers that I was interviewing told me the exact same story, but he was actually there at the time when it happened, and frankly, I didn't believe him when he told me it. So Noelle told me that she's good friends with the people who owned a certain old school style RuneScape private server, and at one point when they were popular, they were making around $120,000 per month in sales. She told me that at one point, one of the owners made a web administration panel that they could use to manage the game, and a black hat in the scene actually figured out how to exploit that, gained access to the panel, and then proceeded to extort those owners for around $8,000 a month. Now, those server owners being mad that this guy had actually exploited their server, they ended up paying somebody $20,000 to go to Thailand and jump this black hat. Noelle said that they, quote, beat the hell out of him and posted it on Snapchat. Then they stole his laptop and some other technology. Immediately, when Noelle told me this, I remembered the story that another private server person told to me some weeks ago, and I wanted to share his side of the story. So this guy was living with a private server owner and some other developers in Thailand working on their server together, And he told me that the owner had been being extorted by some sort of hacker that also lived in Thailand because this hacker had gained an exploit into his server. And the owner had been paying large sums of money to him for some time, but eventually he got fed up with it. So the owner paid a Russian guy that was trained in martial arts to fly over to their studio in Thailand. And at this point, the owner invited this hacker into the studio to have a talk about the ongoing threats. He said that when he arrived at the office, the Russian guy slapped him in the face several times hard, and then they forced him to open up his laptop and phone. Then they proceeded to take copies of his hard drive and then deleted his hard drive afterwards. He said he ran through their house to escape and then called the police. He said that they ended up making up at the police station, probably because the guy they threatened was still too scared to charge him for assault. I showed all of these messages to Noele, and she couldn't confirm if it was the same story or not, but I think it is, and that's really crazy, the extent that these people will go to protect their business. Whether this story is real or not, I'm not sure, but if it is, yikes. Anyways guys, that marks the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Plenty more content planned in the future around topics like this, so if you enjoyed this one, consider subscribing, and until next time, love, peace, and chicken grease.